Hi, I'm Andrea Anthony, and you're watching Eat, Drink, and Bake with Andrea. And today, we're all about pasta. Who doesn't like pasta? And the first recipe is going to be lasagna. And in that recipe, I'm going to make it really simple for you. I'm using a great sauce. It's called Dell Amore. It's a premium marinara sauce, and you will absolutely think that this is homemade. The ingredients in this tomato sauce are vine-ripened tomatoes, fresh garlic, olive oil, herbs, spices, and there's no water or tomato paste. These are the same ingredients I use in my kitchen for making my sauce. So in my world, this tastes like a homemade sauce, and I know you're gonna love it. Let's talk about our ingredients for the recipe. First of all, there are 3 levels to lasagna. Of course, we have a lasagna noodles, we have a meat sauce, and we have a cheese sauce. So, starting with the cheese sauce, we have our ricotta cheese, and you want to make sure it's whole milk. Don't skimp on this. We don't want fat-free, low-fat, whole milk for this recipe. Now, this is mozzarella cheese. It's fresh, and I shredded it. But let me tell you, some time-saving tips. You can buy the shredded mozzarella in the packages. It works for this recipe, and the benefit of it, the texture is a little easier to work with. The fresh mozzarella, you can see it's just a little pasty, a little messier to work with, but I prefer it because the flavor and the texture, once it's cooked, I find to be a lot better. But that's a personal choice. If you want to save some time, you can always use the pre-shredded, and if you have the time, buy the fresh. But if you buy the fresh, you want to make sure you take it out of the oil. It needs to be dry before it's shredded in your food processor because it will stick to the sides. So take it out of the water, dry it off with a towel, and even refrigerate it a little bit. So we make it a little bit hard. When you put it in the food processor, you'll know why. It will process a lot more easily. Important tip. Okay, we have our Reggiano Parmigiano cheese. We have our freshly grated parsley, fresh minced garlic, some salt and pepper, and we have our eggs, which adds a lot of body to the recipe. Let's move on to the meat sauce. Meat sauce, I'm using sirloin. Now let me tell you why I use sirloin. When you saute the sirloin, you're not going to have too much of the drippings that you're going to have to drain off the pan. I like the sirloin, there's minimal drippings, but enough flavor in the recipe that I like to use it. It eliminates a step of having to drain all the fat off it. So it works really well, sirloin. Now, here's our onions. The onions are Vidalias. I am partial to Vidalia onions. They're a bit sweeter. We have our fresh garlic, minced. Again, some fresh parsley. We have our Parmigiano Reggiano. You want to use a really good cheese. And we have freshly ground pepper. Now, you'll notice there's really no salt yet. The salt we're going to add to the end of our meat sauce. We're going to taste it and make sure that it needs it because sometimes you don't necessarily need that extra salt. Now I'm using a marinara sauce. For the marinara sauce, you can make your own or you can find a really premium brand. Now, if you make your own, I suggest use about 2 cans, 28 ounces of San Marzano tomatoes. You want those chopped, and all you're going to do is saute up some olive oil, onions, garlic. When they're nice and brown, you add your tomatoes and you saute that. It's a quick sauce, 15-20 minutes, and then you can add some fresh basil, salt and pepper. That's it. But I'm all about saving time, so I'm using a high premium marinara sauce, and it's going to cut out some time in this recipe. Now the noodles. Okay, these noodles are very classic, and we are going to boil them. We're going to get going on that soon. But the thing to remember about the noodles, you don't want to cook these for the full 10 minutes that most pasta requires. You want to cook them 5 minutes. We just want them pliable, not cooked too much because we're going to bake them. So just enough so that they're soft and pliable, but not fully cooked. And that's going to be about 5 minutes in about 6 to 8 quarts of salted water, about a tablespoon, 5 minutes only, and that's it. All right, so let's start these boiling. We're going to get these going on the stove, and they're going to take about 5 minutes. So while that's happening, we'll come back to the island and we'll start our cheese sauce. So our water is at a rapid boil. We have our salt in there. Now the biggest thing here is you don't want them to stick together. So we're going to keep an eye on these, and we're sort of going to move them around as we put them in. Now this recipe uses about 16 noodles. I always cook extra just in case. And we're just going to let those boil for 5 minutes, and that's it. So in the meantime, let's go back and we'll start our cheese sauce. Well, do you see how easy this is? In goes our ricotta cheese. Okay, we're putting our mozzarella. Let's give that a little stir. And we'll add our 4 eggs. Those are large eggs, by the way. Let's just mix this up so the eggs are well distributed. Our Parmigiano Reggiano. And again, ingredients are so important. Buy a really good Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. It does make a difference. Fresh parsley, our garlic, and some salt and pepper. That's our filling. So we're going to put that aside for now, and we're going to go back and check on our pasta. We are looking good. Okay, now I'm going to show you. Let's grab one of those noodles. You see how they're pliable? All right, but they're not completely cooked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk over to the sink. We're going to drain them, run some cold water, and proceed on with our recipe. You can see that these are nicely prepared. Notice how they don't stick together. Now, we ran cold water on them to get some of that starch off. Okay, we're just going to lay these out. Okay, let's let these sit for a minute and we'll get going on our meat sauce, and then it will be time to assemble. For the meat sauce, we'll start with our olive oil and just kind of roll this around the pan. You want to use a nice saucepan if you have one. A large enough pan, we need some surface area with this sauce. And in goes our garlic. Yeah, we want to hear that sizzle. Now you can throw the onions in together because we don't want the garlic to become too brown, and we are leaving it in the sauce. So in situations like this, you can throw them all together, and let's mix them around. You can see why we want this surface area. We want them to brown evenly. Let's let those cook a little bit. I'll show you what they're supposed to look like. They don't cook too long, but I'll show you what the level of doneness will look like, and then we'll be ready to put the meat in. We'll be right back. Now you can see what the onions and the garlic are starting to look like. That's why visual is much better than time. You want to know what your product should look like because all ovens are different. I'm using a gas flame, electric ovens are different. So know what your product should look like, and this is what we're looking for. So when we get to this point, now we are adding our sirloin. Now you need a nice big spoon because we're going to break that up. And again, another reason why we need a large surface area. We want to spread out the meat so it cooks evenly. Okay, so I'm pressing down on the spoon, making this as flat as I can. Now once you've done that, we're going to let that sit just a little bit, and then once it's browned a little, now we'll start tossing and turning and sort of getting it all mixed together. And as it cooks, it will become more crumbly. So that's what we're sort of looking for here. So let's let that brown a little bit, and we'll be checking on it in a couple of minutes. You can see how nicely it's cooking. At this point, we really don't want to let it sit. We're just going to keep tossing. We don't have a lot more time left on this. Now, 2 things I want to point out. One, you have a little bit of red left, which is okay because we're going to throw our sauce in. And 2, notice there's not a lot of drippings, but there's enough in there so that we can have the flavor that comes out of the meat without having to stop and drain. So that's another time-saving tip. It pays to spend a little bit more money on sirloin because we're not dealing with all the fussing, mussing, and fussing with draining. Hot ingredients, nonetheless. Okay, so now let's add our sauce. For that beautiful tomato sauce. Classic marinara. Now we can also add some of our freshly cracked pepper. It's usually to taste. I say about a half teaspoon to a teaspoon, depending upon how you like it. So let's reduce that to a simmer, give it one more stir, and we'll be back to check on it in about 10 minutes. Just wonderful. And actually, I was using a premium marinara sauce today. So look at these chunks. I mean, it's beautiful, beautiful recipe. Now, something to point out. At this point, we're shutting our flame. The last part of the recipe will be our fresh parsley. We don't want to cook that too much. We're going to let the oils come out. The heat will bring the oils out and give us more flavor, another level in our meat sauce. Now, our Parmesan Reggiano. This you add at the very last moment, because if it's simmering, what's going to happen is it's going to sort of melt and it will stick to your pot, okay? This is a flavor component that adds, again, another level to this meat sauce, and we're just going to mix it in at the very end. Let's taste it. Again, we didn't add any extra salt. Now, I'm using a tomato sauce that has some salt in it, and grated cheese, high salt. So that's why we want to wait till the very end and figure out what we're doing here. Personally, I don't think it needs any salt. Salt and pepper shaker at the table, but this sauce is good to go. So we're going to let that cool down, and then we're ready for assembly. We're ready for our layers. Again, we have our cheese filling, we have our meat sauce, and our pasta. We want a little extra Reggiano Parmigiano for the top. And by the way, I'm using a 9x13. And you can overlap with this. It's usually about 4 sheets per layer. And we have another layer of meat. Now, when some people make lasagna, they also use some extra grated cheese, but remember, we already have it in our cheese sauce. And finally, we top off with the rest of our meat sauce. Oh my God, that's beautiful. And it just smells so good. The aromas of this sauce are just amazing. And when it's put in the oven, your whole house will smell unbelievable. And that's it. We're gonna top it off. A little Parmesan. Right. Now, we had a little bit of reserved mozzarella. Okay, we're just gonna put that over the top. All right, so we are looking good. Now, at this point, we're going to bake this at 375 for about an hour until it's nice and bubbly. Now, you always want to check the middle, because sometimes it will bubble on the sides, but the middle isn't quite hot enough. So you want to just get in there with a knife and just give it a little bit of a test. But when the middle is hot and it's nice and bubbly, you know it's finished. Now, the most important step about lasagna, it needs to sit for about 15 to 20 minutes before you cut it, so we get those nice pieces that hold together. Very, very important that it rests. And we're going to cover this loosely with foil when we put it in our oven. Okay, so let's walk this over. Our lasagna's been baked. We let it rest at room temperature, and now we're ready to cut it. Now, the first piece is always a tricky piece, so I am hoping that this will cooperate with me. All right, and you may want to use 2 spatulas. You want to get right under that. There we go. Absolutely beautiful. And there is our homemade lasagna. Now, what I like to do, I like to make a little extra sauce. You'll have enough sauce to put a little extra on the side, so I like extra sauce on top. So make sure you have a little on the side on the table, and of course, a little more Parmesan cheese, and it's just a really hearty, stick-to-your-ribs meal. Enjoy. One of my favorite pasta recipes is Penne Ala Vodka. And today I'm using what's recently become my favorite marinara sauce. It's called Dell Amore. Dell Amore sauce is all about authentic family heritage, made with vine-ripened tomatoes. It's got fresh garlic, olive oil, herbs, spices, and they don't use any water or tomato paste, which I love. These are the same ingredients I would use for my own sauce, and it saves me a lot of time. So we're using that today. Let's talk about our ingredients. Very simple. We're starting with our penne. Now, this has already been cooked. Follow the package instructions. I like it al dente, so that 10 minutes for perfect al dente penne. If you like it a little more cooked, then go a little longer. And I like to put some butter, about a couple of tablespoons, and toss it up a little bit. And then we have our trilogy over here of our olive oil, our garlic, and our onions, the base of this dish. And I'm adding a little bit of butter to that, make it nice and rich. And then we're adding some prosciutto, adds another level of flavor. Of course, we have our vodka. There's a touch of cream, and at the end of the recipe, we're going to use our grated Reggiano Parmesan cheese, and I'm using my favorite ready-made marinara sauce. But marinara sauce is, you can look up any recipe online, it's pretty easy to make. It's a basic sauce, but I'm using a high-end marinara sauce, which I really stand beside. So I'm using that today, and it works really well with our recipe. So let's get started. We're going to start out first with our olive oil and our butter. Now we have our freshly grated garlic, and you can add your onions at the same time. Let's get those in there. Now that's a little high, so watch your flame. Very good. Okay, let's let that get a little bit brown, and then we'll go on to the next part of our dish. We're a little bit browned here, which means it's time for our prosciutto. That adds such a nice flavor to the dish. As you see, it's nice and chopped. Let's say a dice cut. Now we're going to toss that around, letting those flavors combine, and that aroma is just unbelievable. I wish you could smell this house right now. Okay. All right, so let's let that go just a little bit. And now for the sauce. Right in it goes. Look at this tomato sauce. It's beautiful. Really, really nice tomato sauce. And it looks like our flame's a little high, so let's get that down a little bit. We're going to let that simmer just a little bit to let all of those flavors combine, and we'll be back soon. Let's give this a little taste now. Really nice. Lowering that one more time. We're ready for our vodka. Now, a word about the vodka. You want to use a really good vodka for this. Anything you add in your recipes, it's all about the ingredients. So I would use a nice vodka for this recipe. You don't want to skimp on that. It really does impart a flavor. Now we just want to let that cook off just a little bit. Again, you have to kind of play with your flame as you add ingredients. Keeping an eye on the pan. You know, when you see that simmer stop, you know, obviously you have to bring it up. Sometimes when you add an ingredient, it kind of cools the sauce a little bit or changes that heat distribution, so you sort of have to play with it. Now, the cream. Not too much. We're going to mix that in. And this is what gives us the pink sauce. And you can see how beautifully that's coming together. Now, once you have the cream in, it really doesn't need to cook. This is not a long cooking sauce, so we don't need to cook it too long. All right, but once again, you can see that my simmer has stopped. So what I'd like to do is just increase that flame just a little bit. And I would say at this point, yeah, maybe we're going to simmer for about another 5 minutes or so, not more than that. Okay, let's let that catch up a little bit, and we'll be right back to finish off the sauce. We're going to taste it one more time. Ah, perfect. I'm going to shut the flame. Mix in our fresh chopped parsley. And again, those oils are just going to merge in the dish and just really give it a nice level of flavor. And without the flame going, now I'm going to finish it off with our Parmigiano Reggiano. And that's it. We're going to mix it up and the sauce is done. It's very simple. Once you get it going, it really cooks kind of quickly and we're ready to put it with our penne and finish off the dish. So we have our finished sauce, we have our penne, and I'm going to add just a little bit of pepper. Now I didn't use salt because it really doesn't need it. So we are good with that. And that's one of the things, when you use a ready-made sauce, the salt content tends to be a little bit higher, so you'll find that in your recipes you don't necessarily have to put more in. That's why it's always good to taste. All right, look at this beautiful sauce. It just smells divine. Now, if you like more sauce, you can add the rest, or you can have a little bit on the side at the table for those people who really like to sauce it up. That's me. So we give that a nice toss. They're looking good over here. Let's get that in our finishing bowl. Beautiful. Oh my God, those fragrances, I have to tell you. I'm gonna put a little more sauce on that. And of course, we're gonna add just a little extra cheese, and I like to keep that on the table as well. And there we are, Penne Ala Vodka. This recipe is linguini and white clam sauce. One of my favorite recipes, nice and light, and it has some great ingredients. Of course, we start off with our extra virgin olive oil. We have fresh chopped garlic, Vidalia onions, and some butter. And we're going to have some nice wine we're going to deglaze the pan with. Now it's important that you use a dry wine, a nice wine for this. We have our fresh parsley, we have our grated cheese, and that's Parmigiano Reggiano. And of course, the star of our dish, chopped clams. Now let me just say something about this. These are shucked, they're fresh, and I get them at my local seafood store. So they're beautiful clams, but not everybody can get fresh clams. So you can use canned clams, jarred clams. I have used them all, and they really do come out well. We'll talk about the cooking, if you do use those products, a little later on, how long we cook them. They'll just cook a little less. And then always keep some reserved clam juice on the side. Now, if you buy the prepared products, the jarred products, they'll have enough clam juice in it. There was not a lot of clam juice in this. I actually had the seafood store give me some extra. So we have that because we'll need that clam juice. And of course we have our linguini. Now this has already been cooked. It's al dente, not more than 10 minutes in salted water. So let's get over to the stove and get going on this. Let's start with our olive oil. Into the pan it goes. All right, let's get that moved around a little bit. Next, we're going to add our salted butter. Okay, we know our pan is at the right temperature because you can see that sizzle. Now, you can add the garlic. Let's move this along a little bit. Garlic and onions. Okay, finely chopped. And we're going to mix that around a little bit. Okay, now we're not going to brown these too much. We're going to get these going and they're going to be nice and translucent, and then we're ready for the next step. So let's give them a couple of minutes to get to that point and we'll be right back. These are looking good now. They're not totally brown, just a little golden and translucent. And our white wine. We're gonna just simmer that for a couple of minutes, not too long, just to reduce it just a little bit, and then we'll be adding our clam broth. Now, it's no longer simmering, so we have to raise our heat just a little bit. All right, and we're looking for that simmer, so when we see that little bit of a simmer start to go, then we're gonna reduce our flame again. And really at this point, why don't we just add this? We have our salt and pepper, and we have some red pepper flakes. Now, I like a little heat in this dish, so if you're not somebody that likes that little extra heat, you can always leave that out. And oftentimes, I'll just put it on the table. Okay, I see the sides of my pan starting to simmer a bit. We'll keep mixing this around. You know, the thing with a large pan like this, the heat is not evenly distributed. Most of the heat is in the middle, so you really do sort of have to move it around. Okay, we have reached the simmer point. Now we're going to lower our flame a little bit. We're going to let this go for about 5-7 minutes so all the flavors combine, and then we're just about finished with our dish. We're looking good. These flavors have combined and we're ready for the clams. Now, we're not going to cook these long. These go in the very last minute because clams cook very quickly. Let's raise our flame a little bit. And we don't want to make them rubbery. If you cook them too much, they'll be rubbery. So those go into the last minute, and really they're done when they sort of turn white. Okay, you have to really watch it because some of the parts of the clam are pink and they all won't look the same. But suffice it to say that once the clams are in this sauce, it goes really quickly. So we're going to keep an eye on these. But once again, we brought our flame up so we can get the temperature rising. Now, if you were using jarred clams, those are really going to move quickly. I would say maybe a minute or two, not more than that. And we're actually looking pretty good here. We're going to put in our fresh parsley. Okay, and we'll mix that around. And you're going to throw your linguini right into the pan, which is why you need a nice big pan. All right, so let's just get this tossing. Now, again, you can always keep the broth on the side if you have extra. That's why I always recommend maybe getting a little extra broth just in case you need it. Now, we had pre-cooked the pasta, but you would do this right before you're ready to make the dish so the pasta would be hot. So you would have to cook it less time. And we're looking good. All right, we're gonna get this plated and we'll move over to the island. Here we have it, linguini and white clam sauce. And make sure you keep extra Reggiano Parmigiano on the side because it's just great, adding a little more on top. And we have all this nice broth. Let me show you this. This is just wonderful broth. It's rich, it's delicious. Enjoy this dish, you have to try it. Thank you for watching Eat, Drink, and Bake with Andrea. We had these great dishes today, all about pasta, linguini and white clam sauce, our lasagna, and penne alla vodka. And I used my favorite sauce, which is as good as homemade. Absolutely love it. And that was Dell Amore. I really recommend the sauce. Give it a try. You will love it with recipes and as a standalone sauce. It's really superb. I wouldn't use it if I didn't love it. It's absolutely great. Please visit my website, eatdrinkandbake.com, for great recipes. Follow me on social media at Eat, Drink, and Bake. And remember, no competitions here. It's all about great food, easy to follow instructions, step-by-step recipes, and enjoying friends and family eating together, and that's what it's all about. Thanks a lot. Bye.